President to be given.
President Corey Evans.
President Chris Page.
President. Well, go on, let's say president.
I second the motion.
So by way of the agenda, we are starting with the water department. So we have Chris here, Chris Pratt.
Hello,
Thank you.
Chris Pratt, Chair of the Water Commission. So we have one article for this town meeting. It's to authorize borrowing for the water department up to 1.2 million. This would be the first time the water department has borrowed in over a decade, if I'm correct in that. It's been a very long time. We've been using much of our capital improvements have been paid for by retained earnings. So this would be the first time in many, many years that we've requested authorization to borrow. This is going to be a project that is done in conjunction with the large scale 3A corridor work that's happening by the Mass DOT.
What's that south, right?
Correct, yes, from Situate Town Line by Aubuchon up to just shy of Schofield Road. Brian can speak to more of the particulars on that project, but we have the opportunity, and from what I understand, this has been in the works and been discussed for many, many years.
Since 2013.
Right. So we're taking advantage of the opportunity to replace the water main from the Situate Cohasset Town Line up to just shy of Schofield Road. So the project limits. We will be replacing a 12-inch asbestos concrete water main, which was installed between 1954 and 1967. So it's an opportunity to replace an aging water main that's of a material that we no longer want to use, asbestos concrete. So we will be doing it in conjunction with the other work, which means we'll be realizing some cost efficiencies by utilizing the same contractors and saving on things like mobilization costs, traffic details, things of that nature. So if we did this independently, we would have to get state permitting because it's a state road and it would take a very long time if we could even do it. So there's a lot of good things that come along with doing it in conjunction with the larger project. So that's what we're requesting is authorization to borrow up to 1.2 million. Happy to answer any questions.
Have you projected what's annual payments and how long it's going to be for?
So
Or what's your- what
we
targets?
anticipate, a 20-year note at a 4% interest rate would probably be about $7,000 to $8,000 a month. So roughly 100,000 per year.
Yeah.
Right now, we have just over 2 million in annual debt service payments. And they do roll off and decrease considerably over the next, 8 to 10 years. But one of the reasons we're comfortable borrowing this amount is because over the last 5 years, we've received 2 large authorizations to borrow, which we have not actually utilized. One you may remember was for the GAC project. That was going to be a large filtration system added to the plant.
It's like $3 million or something, right? Yeah.
3.6 million
Okay.
authorized in 2020. After actually putting that out to bid and analyzing if that was the right way to invest the money, it came in about double what we had authorized. It came in around 7 million. And so that changed the analysis on the project quite a bit. We decided that that wasn't the best use of $7 million at the time. So that money is authorized but unissued. And our rate structure was built around that level of borrowing. In addition to a 2022 authorization for 2.6 million for water main replacements. That money has also been authorized but unissued at this point. We've done one street thus far, Beechwood, and we paid for that out of retained earnings.
Right.
So we haven't actually borrowed any of the money that's been authorized over the last 5 years, but our rates were built to support that level of borrowing.
Yeah.
So that's why we're comfortable with this amount at this point.
What are your retained earnings year to year now? I mean, they must be high if you're
They're
high-ish.
around 750,000.
Okay, yeah. So So enough to both pay this debt service and to continue on with doing projects in cash.
Yes.
Okay.
And year over year, as we're not borrowing that money, that additional surplus is rolling to retainer. So
Wonderful.
it's a win-win.
Gotcha.
Do you think, Chris, that you're then going to end up having to spend the money to abate the, what's it, PFAS or whatever it was that.
So that remains to be seen with basically the new administration. There's been some talk about all of the 2029 new PFAS regulations being postponed indefinitely.
I see.
So PFAS still remains a challenge for us and all the surrounding communities and nationally. Our well field is still offline because of high PFAS readings. We're fortunate that Lily Pond is not very high. But treatment and regulation will continue to be a challenge going forward. So long term, and what we'll be spending a lot of time talking about in the future is what we do with the aging plant, the plant that's, reaching 50 years old. We will be likely within the next 8 to 10 years, looking at a large capital improvement investment in the plant, whether it's a expansion of the plant or potentially replacement. Rough math shows that a replacement of the plant likely isn't possible. So we're honing in more on a expansion addition to the plant to expand our treatment process. And so if we can time that around 2031, 32, when all of our current debt rolls off, then we can start doing it with new debt for the expansion of the plant.
So short term, no increase in rates, or in other words, as a result of what you're doing now.
So there's no increase in the rates as a result of this request for borrowing. Our current rate structure goes to the end of fiscal year 26. So we're at the end of our current rate structure anyway. Our operator, Woodard and Curran, is currently undertaking a rate study for us based on all of our capital requirements that we've given them. So they'll be presenting that to us this September. Our hope is that we can put in for, I think it would be November, perhaps, town meeting. We can put forward a new rate structure. But the rates will continue to increase by likely the 2% per year as they have been. But it's not necessarily directly correlated to this authorization.
Okay, got it.
We're probably needing to anticipate the full replacement or the aging of the plant. I mean, I presume you're going to do that through a combination of saving through rates and debt eventually.
Exactly. So we're hoping that we can secure, somewhere between 10 and 50% of the cost through state funding, grants, and other, loans, favorable loans. And the amount that the town has to borrow is minimalist, but we're still probably looking in the, $25-30 million mark at some point. In borrowing, and if we can stretch that over 40 years, which is likely because that's going to be the lifetime of the plan at least. That's a more reasonable amount of debt service per year with the current rates. So it's essentially what we need to build to is rates that will support that level of borrowing by 2032 and beyond.
Okay. And then I'm on.
Yeah. Well,
Water too.
you are? Oh, yeah, you're in North Carolina. That's right.
We got our own problems.
It's true.
Well, we like enterprise funds.
Right.
Mhm.
What's the timeline of the 3A project? Is it actually coming?
Yeah. Brian could probably speak.
Brian.
to it.
Yeah.
Like
So
me?
Yeah.
The owl, which is Brian. Okay.
So they've awarded it to PA Landers. They were the lowest bidder, and they're starting next week. But the first phase is, so let me just describe the project. They're going from a few hundred feet past the Situate border all the way up to Schofield Road, roughly, as Chris said, and they're putting in granite curbing and sidewalks on both sides of the street with, new curb cuts to all the businesses. There'll be a bike lane on the east side, and then a single travel traffic lane, one northbound, one southbound with a center turn lane. So they're getting rid of the two travel lanes, and it'll be a single travel lane each way. So part of that project is they're moving all the utility poles to accommodate the new sidewalk system. And I think that's the next few months, you'll see some electrical work, National Grid. I think they also have some National Grid gas work to do. They're relocating the drainage for the street, running a new drain on the entire length along with our water main. So this water main probably won't start for, until next year sometime, but as Chris said, this is a win in that we don't have to contract it ourselves. We're using DOT's contractor to do the work, and really you're just paying unit bid prices on the piping and the materials. You're not paying all the incidentals and overhead associated with working in this state road layout.
And the Schofield Road, that's an extension past what the original plan was to our benefit, because I seem to remember it ended at Beechwood, but it got extended to Schofield.
Yeah, it changed a few times. I mean, yeah, you remember this is like 2013. This whole thing started, but a few iterations. One went all the way to Pond Street, and then they reduced it back to Beechwood Street, and then and now just carrying a couple hundred feet up the road towards Schofield. And the reason that they didn't do that extra stretch was because of environmental permitting with the wetlands through there. So that's kind of where we're at. There is the other DOT project that's happening coincidentally in the next couple of months. It's the sidewalk addition from Pond Street up to Sawyer Street on the east side of the road, Stop and Shop side of the road. So you'll be seeing those crews up there, but it's an entirely different, I guess, DOT department that's managing that work.
That's the rapid response or whatever project.
Yeah. That one happened really quickly. It's a good program. They thought about it like in 18 months, and they hit the ground running. It's not the 10-year tip process.
Chris, will we be doing the digging on South Main Street through the center of town this year?
Not this year.
Not this year.
No, that's still being evaluated.
Something, okay.
There's been minimal issues with that. We know it's an older main, but there's been minimal issues, and we're really thinking through the disruption of the center down there.
I think we're good. Yeah.
Thank you.
Do we have a actual, do you want to just email us the numbers and stuff, and we'll do a motion in a subsequent meeting?
What says discuss? Oh,
Oh, we can. All right.
Yeah.
So we just didn't have a form in front of us. I didn't know if we were comfortable doing that.
Yeah, so.
Did you say that around?
the-
Just
the
share it.
notice of intent, we said that the objective is to authorize the Cohasset Water Department to borrow up to $1,200,000 for the non-participating cost to replace the water main on 3A from Situate Town Line to Schofield Road.
Then I'll move that we capital budget recommend that project as so presented.
second. Okay, roll call vote.
We can just do aye. The favorite said aye.
Katie's not.
Francine's not here.
okay,
No. So you're 5 today. Thanks, Chris.
All right, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate your time.
Go forth and pump it. Loudest chair in the room, Paul.
Paul Pierce, 39 Old Post Road. Vice Chair of the Sewer Commission. We're here to, we have an article on the warrant to spend up to $500,000.
for the replacement of a tank system at the sewer plant. We say up to 500,000. The quote we received was roughly close to 500,000. I know that Brian
This one?
mentioned there might be some additional funds available to us that Brian can address. I don't know what part of money that would come out of. But we would take this out of retained earnings, this goal. Last year, we purchased a bridge screw system, which we financed over 5 years. And when we went to go install it, we realized that the tank is basically cracked or so. Challenge them to do is to go back and re-quote it out of some different materials or have it coated. So I haven't seen the 3 different variations of it yet, but the consensus from Woodard and Curran, our own subject matter expert, Dan Coughlin, it may be better just to replace it. What the material is now that's there, why it wasn't stainless steel, or if it was, why is it decaying as much as it has been, so. They're looking at perhaps 316 stainless steel versus a 304 stainless steel. Stainless steel has a high nickel content, which keeps things from corroding. So the higher content of nickel you can have, the better off you are with corrosion. So that's kind of the situation. So we just discovered this probably about a month or so ago.
You discovered it when you were trying to do the work from last year, basically, trying to.
Install the grid screw, drain the tank, and say, wow. So Brian, I don't know if it was cracked or it's not leaking, but it's.
Yeah, no, you said it. Yeah, so it's the current tank, it sits at the back of the plant, the rear of the plant, which is why the quote that you sent, you see the big ticket in there is installation. So it's going to require a crane and a lot of staging to get that tank over the top of the roof of the tank, the roof of the treatment plant back there. But it's a 304 stainless steel tank now, and when they drained it and did some measurements, they found up to 60% loss of material on that. So they didn't feel it was prudent to put new equipment in a tank that was degraded to that point. So they recommended replacement with the 316 stainless, as Paul said, and that holds up to chloride corrosion that was the cause of the 304 corrosion.
The tank itself is somewhere around 360,000. It's
Looks like 154 for the tank. 154 for the tank. Yeah, and then another 150 for the installation. So the tank itself is cheap. Yeah, it's everything else. Yeah. Yes, I just put it in the OneDrive folder. Yeah.
Brian, you mentioned some funds that may be available other than coming in routine. So
Yeah, so this, I mean, with the last town meeting appropriation for the internal equipment in the tank, there's 590,000 currently, and we had the ARPA funding, which is doing the I&I work right now. They're about, I'll say about 85% done with the work for all the mains coming into the plant, and they're based on the bids and the amount of money we have budgeted there may be some extra funding to put towards this tank. But that contract's still underway. So there'll probably be a couple of change orders for some laterals that they noticed. But other than that, we probably should still have some overage to put towards this. So Paul said it's up to 500, but that amount won't be known until the I&I project that's underway is done, which is scheduled, I think, it will be done before town meeting, but only a few weeks prior.
But regardless, even if you don't have a lot left in the ARPA funds, you can still pay for this out of retained earnings this cycle. Okay.
Yes.
Sounds like we got to do it, and we got the money for it. So
we do 1.3 million in retained earnings.
Okay.
So the question then becomes, how long does it take to replenish retained earnings? So that's what we're working on right now.
gotcha.
we do have, what's unique to the sewer commission, other than most departments in town, is we have, about 1.7 million in notes receivable,
Oh,
which are paid over 20 years.
yeah.
Two projects that we did, Cook Estate and CJC.
Oh,
So
yeah.
roughly taken about, just off the top of my head, I think about maybe 100,000 a year. So,
Gotcha.
so we do have that coming in, so that is not something that we can capitalize on the balance sheet, because we're on the balance sheet, so. Expenses and so.
That's as far as we go.
Right. So these are private contracts that we have, sewer commission. So those funds come in quarterly basis, they get released.
And those are just for connection fees, or was that to cover any debt that we took on for?
Those are connection fees.
Okay.
Privilege and use fees that were assessed at the time.
Gotcha,
Cook was roughly around 700, CJC was about 1.1.
gotcha. You guys negotiated a longer term payment for 'em.
CJC
They're both in.
was Shop and Stop.
Stop and Shop,
That's-
yeah, I'm sorry,
yeah.
So CJC encompasses all three buildings, 380, 390, and 400 is Stop and Shop.
Yeah.
So that connection went, down to the side where the sidewalks are gonna go on, all the way to, Veterans Pumping Station.
You're right. That's right.
Most of us took on debt as a result of just having the sewer put in about, what, 15 years ago or so. Is that shortly to be written off? In other words, will the notes be paid off in 5 years, 10 years? Do you know where it is?
Which district?
In other words, when the original sewer was actually installed
harbor?
on
Little Harbor.
Little Harbor, Atlantic Ave, everywhere. Most people were charged directly for the actual installation, not necessarily the installation to their home, but the installation in the street. I assume those are coming.
Betterments, I think we have.
Betterments, those
I'm not sure
expired,
what
right?
the-
I think those expired like 2 or 3 years ago, right?
I don't think so.
Yeah,
No, I think we have about another 4 years. Like,
District, so you're the Central District, the Little Harbor District, and North Cohasset. Yeah.
that's what I remember, right? Because we went through the whole transfer of who owns the grinder pumps. Yeah.
The only long-term debt we're servicing is, we built the plans, so far as what I've discovered. Back in 2007, I think.
Rebuilt the plant.
12 million for 20 years.
Okay, sounds like
Something like that.
yeah. The other question for me would be, you've been involved in these resilience discussions, I think, or associated with whatever happens with sea lines. Is that something that you're even thinking about or trying to plan for in any way or think?
Yeah, so we had, yeah, so we're certainly thinking, no shortage of thinking. But, so we've had two big studies. One of them, I kind of put them into two kind of categories. One is the physical plant.
Hmm.
And then one is the electrical side.
Okay.
So we're in the process of, I believe, the electrical side now. The other one just wrapped up this past summer.
Okay.
So Brian can probably speak to that better than I can. We're just waiting for final reports and then recommendations from that, but then we need to tie it to the study that just got approved at town meeting back in May. Where we went ahead, it was a grant, but we had to pay a percentage of it. And I think we had to pay 70,000. That was a study on what I call the electrical side of the house, where we recommend things 3 feet above where they are. and things like that.
So that's coming up for you.
It's coming up for us, right? So we've had two major studies, one just completed, one will be completed. Hopefully. September, I think, Brian, do you know?
yeah, we've submitted, so we got design bid drawings complete with the, as Paul said, the electrical equipment, anything that's low within the plant that is in the floodplain, it would be to replace it and mount it up higher within the facility so it could continue to operate. And we put in for a grant in the last 6 months. We didn't get that grant, so we'll hopefully put it on in one of these next vulnerability cycle grants.
That's federal, Brian, the vulnerability grants for both.
Sorry?
Are the vulnerability grants you're referring to state or federal?
I think it ultimately comes from the Fed, so I don't know how that funding source is gonna be, but it's the most recent ones have been through CZM, Coastal Zone Management, which is a state agency or quasi-state agency, and I think their funding came from the Feds, but they're the local management authority.
So question mark against grant funding going forward.
Yeah.
Since they're not rising.
Sorry, Katie, I didn't quite understand.
I'm referring to the fact that we no longer have climate change concerns
Okay.
at a federal level.
Oh. I understand.
Those
Got it now.
tornadoes yesterday, that was our imagination.
Cease and stop rising. Okay.
Yes, exactly. It's good. It's good news, Chris.
It sounds.
Someone pulled the plug at the bottom of the ocean.
Right, so more to come on that front in terms of. It sounds like the plant itself is quote unquote been rehabbed in 2007, but the real rehab that has to happen.
Yeah, so I've only been a commissioner for 4 years. John Beck was the one who was kind of the genius behind the
Yeah.
financial side. I kind of picked up.
Yeah.
His side of the house. So right now we're just trying to understand the finances from what we have and what we're bringing in over the next couple of months. And then tying those against these studies that we've been doing.
Yeah.
To find out where we are. As I mentioned to Brian. I came on, this is my second term, beginning of my second term, and it's been a lot of crazy improvements. I mean, we had this whole membrane problem. And we had spent $1 million on membranes and half of them went down. And so we ended up we had to challenge the warranty. And so we challenged the warranty. I think we ended up having to pay, I think, half of it, which is $250. To get new membranes back in and installed. Those are just arrived and they've been putting them in and. You know, our plan was to assess, there's two sides to membranes. We have two sections of membranes, so one failed, one was working just fine. And they were both installed at the same time. So we're looking at some sort of more of a pre-maintenance or a maintenance schedule of maybe replacing them anyway every 6 or 7 years, smaller sections at a time, so it's affordable to do it. And kind of rotate them, so we always have something working at the same time, because we had a tough time with just one section working.
Yeah.
So it was, Woodard and Curran is a fantastic job. I mean, they are just.
You were having to send a lot to Hull as a result, weren't you? Or not?
Well, we did a little bit, but not much.
Okay.
Yeah, we didn't, it wasn't like a whole turn the valve on thing, so, it worked pretty well. Those guys, we had to scrub like crazy, so it was a lot of labor on their side of it, so, our rates did go up with them a little bit, but it wasn't earth shattering by any means.
Yeah.
So, and then we had this grit screw pump go, and then now the tank is going, you know, it seems like, it's shy of repairs, it's more of replace. It's frustrating, you know, it's. why
So you think you're ahead of it?
Why
Yeah.
can't repair something, you know, I just.
Yeah.
Yeah, we had these. When I first came on, we were talking about these barn doors we couldn't find a contractor in the United States to fix the big doors out on the front of it, to open it up and get the stuff in and out of there. That took, 4 or 5 years before we finally got a guy to make it. And the money was allocated, but we just couldn't get anyone to do it.
Yeah.
So it's just this. I don't know. Not really a comedy of errors, but it just seems like these little things kept popping up and they were no less than 300,000-400,000 at a time.
Yeah.
So it's hard, you know, we've had a transition in the accounting side of the house, so we're, trying to gather our stuff together, and if we can get it on one piece of paper, that'd be great.
Yeah.
So I will add that, so we're currently, we got a grant, it's called an AMP grant, Asset Management Program, and this is gonna be helpful in our next year's capital discussion. So they're going through every piece of equipment and cataloging inside the plant, well, anything associated with the plant, giving it, a life a life cycle, a cost, and also a risk of failure, is it critical, is it semi-critical, that kind of thing. And we should have that as part of the discussion next time. So that'll help the sewer commission and department forecast, the capital needs of the plant going forward, hopefully.
Brian, is that gonna cover the 14 pumping stations we have? Cause I know we just rebuilt 2 of them.
I'll have to check. I think it was the plant, but it may be an extension of the collection system.
We have Woodard and Kern to go out and start taking a look at some of the other pumping stations.
I mean, they're great.
Veterans in Deer Hill were upgraded because of the 2 connections that we had to make to them.
Right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yep.
So we just want to make sure the other pumping stations are.
Would you take a peek? Before it takes a peek on you.
I know.
So you're looking for a motion to expend up to $500,000 out of retained earnings for replacement of the tank.
553.
So the revised budget is 1053. Do we want to run it as an additional 553, or do we want to do we have to do the thing where we revise the original thing to the higher number?
So I think, Corey, to answer your question, so there was there was an appropriation for 500,000, but there was also another appropriation for 90,000. So right now, the budget that's in hand is 590, so it'll cover that extra 53 over the million. So up to 500 would be enough. Answer your question.
Thumbs up on that? Okay.
I would
great.
do 550, but Brian's running this project, just in
We-
case.
we got some ARPA money there.
It'll all just go back into the
It all
enterprise.
comes back if it's not used, but if we don't have it, then the project can't move forward,
All right, yeah.
so.
You wanna make it?
I'll make a motion to appropriate $500,000 from retained earnings for a new tank for the sewer department.
Second,
Aye.
all those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Unanimous.
5-0. Okay. Awesome. Well,
Thank you very much.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming in person.
I'm 2-0 now. Thank you.
Yeah,
Great. Take care. Thank you.
Thank
very
you.
much.
Good night.
So we have Brian, should we?
We should talk, Sidewalk Street, yeah,
Yeah.
Sidewalks, sorry, was that?
yep. Pond Street,
The,
Oh, yeah, so the high school extension, in particular, was the schools, had a request, I believe it was 50,000. I met with, a contractor out there, and it's gonna be closer to 75,000. Then that is if we don't get any kind of, onerous kind of requirements from Concom permitting, which I think if we end up having to do permeable pavement or under drains or anything like that, I think we'd probably postpone the project, for future consideration.
how much does, I know you have, a hate relationship with permeable pavement.
No, I mean, it's got its uses, it's a cool.
you don't have to, you can hurt its feelings.
But it's,
No, I-
like, it doesn't have, the only way it should be in the public, right of way is maybe around tree wells and small installations. It shouldn't be a continuous, layer of asphalt on a long stretch of sidewalk. That's,
I was just
think
gonna
it's-
ask the cost increase if you were to go from impermeable to permeable.
Yeah, so last time we did it was about $90 a ton for regular asphalt, and it was $240 a ton for permanent pavement.
Wow.
And that's why that section of sidewalk from, Fair Oaks down towards the Stop and Shop plaza there is, paved in gold almost. We had to use permeable pavement for that entire stretch, and if we're gonna get permitted like that again, I'd recommend other type, infiltration or catch basins, deep sump catch basins, something with regular pavement that just pitches in the proper direction so you can treat the water before it goes to the wetlands, which is what we're proposing at this, short 170 feet section of sidewalk at the school. Pitches towards the street. There's already catch basins there with deep sump that get rid of your suspended solids before it goes to the wetlands. We could also even put a T in on the outlet of one of those that would clean up the discharge. So there's plenty of treatment there. I don't think we need to do anything extravagant.
Okay.
Hopefully not.
And was there something else about snow clearing on permeable? Was there something that you had to do differently, or is it the same?
You're supposed to vacuum it every year. So we bought a $10,000 vacuum cleaner. That was part of a grant, but we have to go out and vacuum it. So it's
Sweep the woods.
I knew there was something else that was like a maintenance, go fluff the permeable pavement once a year.
yeah, it's
We'll just, if this doesn't work, we'll give the kids like gravel in their pockets and have them drop it as they walk by, and over a year, we'll have the next walkway.
Alright, so you're comfortable with moving from 50 to 75,000 as sort of the best estimate, assuming permitting that doesn't require extra bells and whistles? Okay.
Yeah, because we just have to do the LOI, right? That was kind of the thing that they want you to come back with.
yeah, do the NOI and then we'd detail the design a little bit more and
Okay. Okay.
Any other updates, Brian, besides the sidewalk?
I think the only thing we need from you, Brian, at some point is to vote. We need to vote the roadways and sidewalks number. And you had presented, obviously, the paving plan and the cost, but it was sort of the cost that included both chapter 90 and before the cost, or before sort of our better pricing. And so I guess the question that we had was like, what are we voting in terms of the number? Is it 800,000 or is it something else?
so it's going to be the full amount of the budget, but it was we're meeting with TL Edwards. He was on vacation the past couple of weeks. Meeting with him next week to ride the roads, and he's going to work up the quotes for our streets this year, which are Pond Street with the new sidewalk on the west side of 3A, Bancroft Road, Short Street, that's getting a new water main in prior to that, and Beechwood Street on the east side of 3A. So those are our roads, and once we get those numbers, we'll forward them. But we anticipate using the entire road fund amount.
Yeah, so I think for us, all we have to do is authorize the transfer out of the road fund amount into the sidewalk fund. So our vote's just gonna be for the full 800,000 stabilization fund.
Right.
Because we don't control chapter 90.
Correct.
That was my question.
Yeah.
Like if the number comes in at 1.1, like Brian expects, we only control 800,000 of the 1.1.
Exactly, yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So we're just sending over the 800,000 that we have jurisdiction over.
Okay. Yeah.
What did we do last time? So I'm just pulling up the warrant from last time, just to see what the language was.
And I think we had to re-vote it at special town meeting, so I'm gonna look at that one.
Oh, that's great. Oh, yeah, so that's what we did last time, DPW roads and sidewalks. We did 900,000. Yep, we recommend $900,000.
I don't think 900,000 is the number that it's at, I think it's
eight or
eight.
is it 9?
My recollection is, I believe it's 8.
I think it's 8. I have in
That's
my,
what we have voted.
Okay,
I think there was, and I think the select board voted a 2% increase.
I don't think they did it for the sidewalk, they did for the schools.
Yeah.
Yeah, they aborted on the.
Right, yeah.
Stab fund. So why did we do $900,000 last time? I wonder?
Probably a mistake.
Well, that's why I'm looking.
Yes.
I know we had to revise something at special town meeting.
you also might have had a balance. I don't know. But I know the new contribution coming in is 800,000.
Okay, then that's really what we should do then.
It says in an update, a vote taken under Article 8 at annual town meeting on June 3rd. Funds totaling $800,000 to be transferred for roads and sidewalks, special stabilization funds.
Okay,
Yeah.
let's just do that.
That was their transfer.
Yeah.
Select board's transfer. Or authorization to fund the fund. They have.
Yeah, that was, it was transfer out and in, correct.
It raises an interesting question, that if he's gonna spend 1.1, should we actually acknowledge that in some way? In other words, it's a capital expenditure. All we absolutely have, what is separate for us is this 800,000, which is the stabilization fund. But the actual expenditure is 1.1.
Yeah, but you used to vote, when it came out of the capital stabilization fund, you only voted on the 300 or whatever that came out of the capital
That's
stabilization
correct.
fund. And 90 was under select board's purview, so we should just probably follow that same
Okay,
structure,
all right.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, then I make a motion that we recommend $800,000 to be expended out of the roads and sidewalk stabilization fund.
I do.
Is that enough?
Yeah.
Yeah. Second, Susan Franklin, all those in favor?
I,
Aye.
we want to hold on street expansion until we get through the rest of the conversations.
I mean, there's no reason to do it now, Brian. I mean, is there any chance that we get any new data in the next 2 weeks?
Well, I think 75 would cover the cost, and I think if honestly, if we're required to do a
More, you
major,
can come back.
yeah, I think we punt, we
Okay.
don't.
All right, then I make a motion that we recommend expenditures of $75,000 out of the capital stabilization fund for the Pond Street sidewalk extension at the Cohasset Middle High School.
I'll second.
And that is out of the capital stabilization fund. I said that right? Yeah,
Yes.
not the school. Okay.
Just a quick check, guys.
Mhm.
If you vote that and you also vote the fire department funds
Mhm.
and everything else, where are we?
At $2,023,006.
Yeah, we're still about 75 grand under our,
You still are.
yeah,
Yep.
we're still good.
Okay, so there's no other surprises we should be aware of.
No, we asked the question
No,
last week,
I don't
we'll ask
want-
it again this week.
We're not hearing
The
anything
only
new.
thing after these discussions is town hall. And that's gonna come after we go to CPC,
Okay,
but that's not gonna affect yours.
that's not gonna affect
Yes.
FY
Yes,
26.
correct.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. I'll go. All right, I think we can release Brian.
Thank you, Brian.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks, everyone, appreciate it.
Thanks.
Okay.
Okay, so let's,
We've got 4 items. We've got dealer's choice, you guys call it.
Let's
We've got-
I say let's start with LOS Tower.
Sure.
Because it's
Go from, yeah.
not the smallest, but
Mhm.
is that okay?
Yeah.
All right. So we got the reply from Chief quickly on the radio communications. Any other follow-ups, any questions from that front? Ralph, you
Well,
had
I
the most
certainly,
concerns.
yeah, I raised okay. Let me see what I understand of this, and you probably read what I wrote, okay?
Yeah.
What I said, there are really 3 things going on here. One is we're gonna have a tower with AT&T and Verizon,
Yep.
whoever else is on, it, right? We're not gonna pay for that, so that's not a concern.
Correct, yes.
That's free. okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The second is, and that is pretty clear from what he writes, but is not clear from what in fact we've gotten from Ron Menard, is that there is a UHF transmitter receiver going on there. Okay, so that's number 2.
Mhm.
There's no, I don't see where that's separated out, okay? Or who's paying for that or how that's being paid for, okay? that's number two. I'm gonna give you number three, then we can talk
Okay,
about it.
okay.
Number three is really just a Wi-Fi extension
Mhm.
to actually improve the ability to write tickets. At Sandy Beach, okay. You have to really ask yourself, what is the 50,000 paying for? Is it the dish to produce Wi-Fi? Or is it the UHF receiver transmitter? What is it? And the reason I raise that is that that is a separable question, where one is clearly needed, that is the UHF, and the other is very questionable. In addition to which, it also involves, where do you put a tower? On whose property, with what permission? And should we even have a tower, anything impeding the view to Sandy Beach at all? So,
I didn't understand it to be a tower,
oh,
though.
it has to be. It has to be, it's line of sight, no choice.
So the tower thing though is, as you said in the beginning, a little bit of a separate thing outside of what we're talking about, right? Because that was the easement for that was at
Oh,
town
that's-
meeting.
there's no
Yeah,
question,
correct,
no,
yeah.
zero question. There's no doubt we should do that, right? And there's no, in my view, there's no doubt we should obviously have improved UHF communication. I can understand why he wants that, no problem. Once you get that UHF communication working well, you're not gonna see anybody at Rocky Beach holding up, even though it's a phony thing, but
Yeah,
I mean, who took the picture, huh?
yeah, exactly,
Anyway,
right.
Okay, you are not gonna have anybody doing that, right? And that UHF, in fact, will easily extend all the way to Sandy Beach or Atlantic Ave, whatever you wanna say. So I totally support doing that. But there doesn't seem to be a division of what that's costing versus what is this microwave relay system costing, which is only gonna produce Wi-Fi at Sandy Beach. And with a comment which I think a lot of people would question, providing Wi-Fi, not just for ticketing, but Wi-Fi for everybody who's at Sandy Beach being on our network. I'm not so sure I buy that. But anyway, the point is, it's really Wi-Fi with an Ethernet signal, as far as I know, enabling them to more easily write tickets at Sandy Beach. That's principally it. So,
Well, I mean, we also have. Whenever we have events down there, right, those have been, and that was highlighted, like, again, we got the triathlon, right, and that's a huge operation from both police, fire, as well as the vendors, all that kind of stuff, so I think that I do think there's an operational side of this, which is beyond just somebody surfing the internet when they're on the beach, right? I agree that seems not worth the investment. But when I think about the other things that or fireworks, right? Like there's now these big events at Sandy Beach, and whether or not, I've got my own issues with that anyway, but in those situations, having that extra capacity, that extra backbone, to me still makes sense, even if for those situations as well.
why
The
wouldn't they
email
just?
from Quigley identifies two things that are gonna operate off that Wi-Fi network. He says our mobile data terminals, which I understand to be what's in the actual police vehicles.
Correct, yeah, so they can
And
run
the
tickets
hand-
and stuff, yeah.
No, and then the handheld devices from which they write tickets. So the terminals in the police vehicles are what I remember him talking about, them having. Again, it operates, it's more than just the radio back in the olden days, where you'd radio back to headquarters and call in a license number. It basically becomes a mobile computer, as I understand it,
Right, yeah.
in the vehicle, and that's what they're talking about, in addition to the mobile handheld ticketing. Of the two, like ticketing, important revenue source, but for me, safety wise, it's the mobile data terminals in the actual cruisers.
Why doesn't anyone realize they already have that capability? There's lots of signal there. It just happens to not to be Wi-Fi. And the signal is just fine there. Whatever they've got and whatever they're saying is not true. You can go there with your cell phone. You will see, as I have written, the actual performance, it's LTE, it's 2 to 3 bars there. It's phenomenal. And you also, with a new AT&T Verizon, whatever, tower we've got going up on Forest Ave, or whatever you want to call it, you're gonna get additional capability with LTE, or maybe even 5G. What are we talking about? This makes no sense.
I mean,
I mean, really, guys, have you ever had a problem with
Yes.
communication?
Oh, I have, yeah, all the time. Yeah,
All
yeah,
the time.
I run there. I run literally and my
I
phone
walk it every
drops off
day.
all the time.
I
And same
walk
thing
it.
with Rocky Beach. I mean, if you go,
I'm on
On the hill.
Verizon, but I can tell
Yeah,
you that like
exactly.
I cannot drive down from Rocky Beach down Jerusalem and keep a signal.
I can't believe you guys.
yeah,
You
no,
have
this
to
is true.
turn-
What do you
Yeah,
have
turn
for
your Wi-Fi
equipment?
off.
yeah, yeah. No.
I mean,
Yeah.
seriously,
You have to turn your
The,
Wi-Fi off.
the other
before
thing
you
though
sell it- sell
is,
to work.
Yeah.
it's also where
'Cause mine
I will
doesn't have-
you know,
I-
deferring is a hard word,
Yeah.
right? But if at a certain point, we have to believe the people that are entrusted with our network operations, our police operations, right? There's just a certain point in time where we have to go, if that's what you're telling me you need and that's the right setup, I may think it's overkill, or I may think it's, you know, a weird thing from my perspective, but I'm not the one answering the phone call. I'm not the one that's in charge of operations, and I don't want to be the one who's in charge of operations. So if that's what the people who are running the operations telling us we should do, I'm inclined to, I don't want to say give the benefit of the doubt, but defer to that, because they're going to be the ones who are responsible for using it. And I don't necessarily think, I think if I'm weighing the two risks, the risks of not doing it and potentially, again, maybe so small, but somehow disrupting their ability to do their jobs as they see it versus the, you know, if we're putting a UHF, we're already running data up there anyway. I mean, maybe it's a $5,000-$10,000 added cost. I don't know, to your point. But to me, the scales of that still weighs in the side of deferring to the people who are operating it.
you know, I hate to use this, but it was a solution looking for a problem, and it always was.
Yeah,
That's what it was. This didn't even come up, has never come up until Ron Menard decided this was an opportunity for him.
I don't go down that path, because it's not like Ron is making money off this, right? This is, you know, he's gonna wanna have a tower, but at the end of the day, he doesn't personally benefit from it. He's gonna wanna have a network because he's a network guy. I get that. So obviously he wants stuff, but at the same time, it's not like he's gonna, you know, be able to play Fortnite on the sandy beach. Like, there's no kind of
But
personal
it's not-
thing,
it's
right?
not that, there's much more psychologically involved in this, but anyway. What we're saying, if we in fact approve this, is that we're saying we're okay with a dish and a tower at Sandy Beach. And I don't want to be the person having to say that. I wouldn't do that under any circumstances.
I'm only voting from capital, right? I'm only voting from the capital perspective. I mean, the town needs to have a longer conversation that's more of your, you know, discussion about, okay, is this really what we want? And from the residents need to have that. From the capital side, though, when it comes to it, making an investment in equipment in order to meet an operational goal, I don't have a problem with it.
Then we should wait for the town to tell us whether they are going to accept it. We should not be presuming that this is okay by the residents or by anybody who in fact is down at Sandy Beach. We should not presume it and just say vote it because, well, maybe they will, maybe they won't. That's not an appropriate job for us. In other words, if we don't get the actual thing right, that is in fact, people agree this is necessary and wanted. And in fact, nobody objects who actually lives there, or anybody who goes there doesn't object, fine, great. But then we can say it. I would not say you should ever vote this now. We're saying, oh yeah, we like this. We don't like, some of us don't like this. We think this is wrong. So that's where I am.
Our job is to advise residents, because town meeting will vote this, right? We can't have town meeting vote and then us do something. Once town meeting votes, it's over, right? There is no second chapter after town meeting. So the whole purpose of our votes is to make a recommendation on whether or not the funds spent are reasonable, right? And it's not like we're saying it's gonna be $5 million so that we can, again, send Snapchats from Sandy Beach, right? I'm being hyperbolic, intentionally make a point here. This is a comparatively small amount of money, especially if we agree that the UHF function is high. The tower is going up anyway. We're taking advantage of someone else's labor to add value to what we can do at a comparatively low price. So when it comes to just the value for the capital expenditure, that's my bucket. I say that this is good for that, because we're not spending hundreds of thousands of dollars. I mean, we spent, you know, how much money have we spent over the last 5 years in IT projects, right? I mean, millions of dollars. And if you total them all up, and this is, for what we're getting, small bucket for that. So that's where I go.
So you obviously think, I think it's clear we should have the UHF. It should be priced out and it should be paid for. I would never support this idea of putting a tower of any kind, Sandy Beach, whether or not it's 50,000 or 100,000 or $25. I think it's a terrible, terrible idea. If you want to see what we do when we think about these things, just take a look at all the things we actually put out. Take a look at Wadley Park where they put a call box. We spent the money to fix up Wadley Park. What do? We put a ugly little box there because nobody thinks about what in fact we do to the environments we're creating. I am absolutely opposed to doing these kinds of things. I really am. They are not necessary. They've got two new sources of actual communication, namely the tower with at least two providers on that tower. And they've got the UHF. They've got two things going on. They're gonna add a third thing now. Why? This doesn't, well, why wouldn't the tower with the current communications from either one of the two providers, I think we use Verizon, since they're gonna put Verizon up there, why isn't that signal significantly better? So that whether or not you've got a terminal in your car or a terminal in your hand, why isn't that why we're doing it? That's the purpose. This was just an add-on without a clear objective, because the objectives were in fact to improve the signals, and both those signals are gonna be better at Sandy Beach than they would have been, and without the microwave link, and without it.
So if you keep on saying tower
Yeah.
for what's going on at Sandy, I did not understand it to be
Well,
a
in order
tower.
to have a microwave link, you have to have a tower with a dish on it, and that dish has to have.
Yeah, so there's gonna be the tower
Yeah.
in the
Yeah.
woods, and there's gonna be a tower or a receiver on a telephone pole.
Well, I
at
guess
Sandy Beach.
that's, to me, it was, the line of sight was either using a telephone pole or using private property. Sandy Beach
Yeah,
Association,
yeah,
but
right.
there's no, I guess my point being is that there's no addition, I mean, the telephone poles are still
If
going,
it's,
going
do
to
you know
exist.
it's on a telephone pole? Do we know where it's going to be?
It
We don't
says
know, do
on
we?
The invoice here, it says to be located on a telephone pole at 45 feet high.
Is this still the case?
And
So-
conduit installed to building or possible overhead line conduit is not included in this town's responsibility.
Yeah.
So it says-
So my only point is that it's, we're not adding new obstructions except for
Do we really, do they have the permission to put a microwave link on a telephone pole?
I don't know, I don't know the answer to that question, but again, that's implementation wise, that's IT and the town's department to ensure that.
It's,
Right. And they're
I'm
not
a,
gonna
I'm a
spend-
citizen of the town, and I don't think this is the kind of thing you want to put anymore down in Sandy Beach. If anything, if the telephone poles ought to be put underground, never mind adding
Well,
additional
I'm with,
stuff.
I'm with you on putting things underground, but we've
this
we've
just-
already explored that cost and
Yeah.
it's
This-
millions and millions of dollars for the town.
Palm Beach is doing it.
I know, but
No,
we've costed it
joke.
out in town and it's like, it's.
But anyway,
Rodeo
the
drive.
point is, we really don't know where this is going, because it's now varied between being on top of the existing building, which is there, which they can't do, to now being on a telephone pole. That just came up this week, right? Last week, we talked about being on the other building. So none of this is real. This is all in flux right now. I mean, I just don't understand why we're doing stuff like this. I don't.
I'm considering, I still,
I know.
you know, we're all
I know.
citizens
We're
here
different-
and we're all,
different on this one.
I don't,
Passionately opposed to.
yeah,
this,
yeah.
you know.
then I think your concerns, I value them and I appreciate them.
Appreciate that.
I'm still okay with this, so I'll move that we recommend it. The 53,866.83, if that's the new total. For the. Let me just get it. $54,000 for the LOS project, to link. The, for the LOS project as presented to us.
I'll second.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
I'll say aye, but I do want to just caveat and say that I don't think capital budget only looks at the numbers. I mean, I think we've done a really good job over the years at really kicking the project and making sure that it's made sense for the community. And to the point where projects have changed because of our input. So I don't want to become a committee that's only looking at numbers. I'd like us to continue to do the good work that we've been doing.
If that's what it sounded like, that wasn't my intention. My intention was, you know, if we're making a capital investment, is it going to be utilized by the town in an effective way? Like, so we talked about the UHF, and if we're spending $50,000 that way, the police can talk better. I think that's you know, and if I'm hearing that the police chief is having communications issues, I believe that, right? I'm not gonna go with a radio down every 30 feet and stress test that theory. So that, I think that's where I.
No,
draw the
that
line.
part of it,
Yeah.
I agree with you there. We do have to look to them, but Ralph's point is a different point. He's talking
Sure.
more about the beauty of the town and how we, we go about in, doing projects in this town and make sure that we maintain, sort of that core, understanding of how we want our town to be. That's why zoning laws are so important, and we see them in other towns that didn't have good zoning laws and where they end up, where people just vote for things. So I think it's good to have the spirited debates outside the numbers. For that reason. And as I said, we have had other projects where we would come back with a much better solution by having a spirited debate. On these things. So, yeah.
Chris,
So Susan, are you?
I voted for it, yeah.
Aye, I'm with that. I mean, my caveat would be, I think Ralph makes good points. But they seem to drift into kind of public policy and town meeting type decisions as to what the town should look like. I'm not acquainted with the town meeting process. Does that provide a forum for people to
No.
ventilate?
Not really. When the capital appropriations are brought up at town meeting, they're usually voted as a lump. And so it really, our recommendation, unless the select board decides they don't like it,
or advisory.
or advisory, don't like it, they'll always like it, they do. So there's no change there.
That's not true. You've done some credit. You know, the advisory's got a good committee now, and they've batted stuff. I mean, they do it behind the scenes, but they've batted
Sort
stuff.
of, but anyway, the basic point is that in fact, once it gets through the committees and it's on the ballot, yes, you could challenge it if you wanted to, or the warrant, you could challenge it if you wanted to, but it's never challenged, okay? Those things are
No,
challenged.
what'll happen at town meeting is someone will support the motion to move these projects, and then the moderator will say, is there any discussion? And I'm certain that residents of the community will stand up and say, I have no problems with a lot of these things, but this radio antenna project, I have questions about, I have concerns about. And Ralph saw one of the concerns of other concerns in the community and that are different. So this is something which I'd imagine there will be many people that will want to vocalize concerns and have debates about. So whether or not it gets through or not is up to the quorum of that committee, right? I mean, if you've got 40 people that don't like it, but you got 60 who do, that's how democracy works, right? So, but there will certainly be spirited debate about this. I
Open,
doubt.
open
They
space
won't
and
even
rec,
understand it. It's too
Well,
complex.
I would say that open space and rec has already put up objections about the wheelwright tower itself. So any addition to that tower, to Corey's point, could draw a conversation at annual town meeting. I mean, the select board has already addressed a couple weeks ago that the wheelwright project is going forward. It is a public safety issue. North Cohasset needs a signal boost, but there is objection if you like. Cohasset 143 and Open Space and Rec have come out against it. So there is,
understand.
there has been
I know.
conversation about the antenna itself. So additions to the antenna could draw conversation, but to your point, if there's something that somebody feels passionately about, they do get up and speak at the mic.
This one is they could easily speak at this. I don't want to go on this, just a little bit. They can easily speak about something they understand, like a tower on land which we consider to be
Conservation land.
conservation. So, and it is conservation. Basically, that's it.
They're doing a swap, but yes.
Yeah, so that's what it'll be about. But if you want to talk about whether or not it should be a microwave link or whether UHF should go up there, there's practically 10 people in the audience who know what I'd be talking about, to be perfectly honest with you. That just simply is not something we'll understand. So that will not be contested. So it may be they would contest the tower itself. they'll never contest whether or not it should be a microwave, like, they just won't know what to make of it. And nobody will know, and nobody will even appreciate the fact that we'll have increased 3 forms of communication simultaneously, one of which was unnecessary. I mean, who's gonna know that?
You will, and I mean, I will know that,
You will.
I disagree on the unnecessary thing, and that's kind of where
I know.
we're going back and forth, and I mean, that's, I think.
I'm not gonna argue anymore.
No, we're good. Well, again, this comes from the person who had to get the constable called them at town meeting, so. I was being obstructionary, so this is, oh, yes,
Oh.
very acceptable.
I knew you were not at a certain level. I vote aye, too, for the sake of.
Obviously, no.
All right, so we got a 4-1 on that.
And just to be clear, your objection is to the second part of the project.
Only the microwave link. I'm
Okay.
absolutely
The Wi-Fi
not-
link.
Totally in favor of the UHF, I know that.
Yeah, if you really want to confuse town meeting, you could do a amendment. Are you thinking about it? As someone who's tried that and failed, Dan Evans, I think that's a different way to do it. Like, he gave you such a look when I did the amendment. He was like,
I know
I think I see what you're trying to do, and I think it's a bad idea.
But I will tell you, people get up and debate zoning, even though they know nothing about zoning.
Oh, yeah.
It affects them so personally, though, you know,
All right.
you've been through that.
I've been through that,
I know.
people do get up and debate with
Yeah,
limited information.
well, you know why they get up. They have a personal interest in a piece of property or a number of pieces of property. You know
Oh,
exactly how that
yeah.
comes up.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
You know.
Or Stasko sends his wife.
Yeah, exactly.
To speak.
I know how it works.
So do you want to jump into the fire truck from here on out, or do you want to jump into the school buses from here on out?
It's all.
Which Ralph, I'll give you the floor for what we should.
Might as well do the fire truck line, get all of this over.
Did we have any luck on alternative
So
quotes?
what I did do, just today
Yep.
is I reached out to Osage, Bulldog, MAPC.
Okay,
Who is a consortium that we can purchase from.
Okay, good.
Osage is a manufacturer,
Yeah.
Bulldog also the same thing.
Yeah.
And what I did is I sent the quote that we received in 2019.
Okay,
And I said, this is what we got in 2019. I want you to escalate the price of exactly what we got in 2019
okay,
to today.
okay,
And tell me where that shakes out.
okay.
Unfortunately, they won't be able to get it to me until the end of the week.
Okay.
But I have 3 different people
That's
working on
exactly
this.
that's precisely where I would have been. Okay,
Okay, so that's
right.
what I'm doing.
Okay, thanks.
So you're welcome. So
I'm serious. Yeah,
by the
Yeah.
end of the week, we will have those comparisons.
Good.
So maybe we table this until the next time we meet, just so everyone feels comfortable that we have
Fine with me, and I think we also need to
Provisional
ping it off the fire chief to say, these are the alternatives,
100%.
and explain why.
Yep.
These don't work, or what could work here, especially if any of them come in any cheaper. I mean, if we can get one for $100,000 less, by all means, right? So,
But I guess
Terrific.
my
Terrific.
question.
Yeah.
My question about the consortium pricing, so Lifeline, part of the argument that the chief was putting forth was around maintenance and Lifeline being a closer maintenance.
Yeah, 20 miles. Right. Yeah. I see.
Right, I mean, again, 20 miles, but.
but Osage was 24, it wasn't
It wasn't
drastically different, right?
It was 62 versus I think 45.
Yeah.
63 versus 45.
I can.
Okay, it's just
appreciate
20
that.
miles different delta,
And I
okay,
think if,
gotcha.
you know, you have to weigh the pricing.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly, right,
Okay.
So-
exactly, if it's.
But I
it's-
So we have a full picture.
That
Do
was
they-
my
do they
question,
ever
so we're going
itemize-
back to the original,
Yes.
we're going back to the other dealer for pricing, got
Correct.
it, okay.
Any itemization come out of all of this or not?
So what I did is I took the itemization list that we got from this vendor.
yeah.
I took everything out of it,
Okay.
so it would be blind and said,
Okay, good.
I want you to tell me line level, how this increases the cost.
Okay, good.
So by the end of the week, we should have a full picture.
That's good.
And maybe it'll be less expensive, maybe it won't, but at least
Yeah,
we'll know.
know. At least we'll know.
Yep.
That's great.
Mhm.
Thanks.
I bet one of them comes over, it's over 6, that's, I'm gonna put, Price is Right rules. Yeah,
Yeah.
No, I
You're
should
gonna-
say
you're gonna go-
$1.
You're
then.
gonna go over.
Oh, yeah, no, that I messed that
I
up.
think all of us are. But
Nothing like competition to find out what's real.
Yeah, gut check is good.
just you had one other concern that I just wanted to flush out, which was about the
Oh.
striker.
Yeah, the hydraulic scissor lift.
Mhm.
I mean, that's all it is. What you got from, John Dockley was, that the vendor would not continue to maintain it if we moved it from one vehicle to the new, from the current vehicle to the new vehicle.
Correct.
Okay, so I took a look at the warranty on Stryker. There's no such document in the Stryker warranty. Doesn't exist. I also went back to the 2021 statement that was made by Bob Sylvia, in which he says it should have a 12-year life and could be moved from one vehicle to the other. You can look at the exact language. So I said to myself, why this unwillingness to move a standalone piece of equipment, which is really a scissors lift? That's what it really is, a very fancy scissors lift. And it does not attach to the fire truck in any way, except when you actually put a patient in there with a cot on, with a cot. It does not attach to the fire engine. Why, in fact, won't you move something that's only 4 or 5 years old, 6 years old at most, when you finally move this Stryker device? Why won't you move it with this very little life on it, used life, and not move it to the new vehicle? So it's really an $80,000 saving.
So we have two currently, a 2016, we have a 2016, which is on ambulance 2.
You're right. That's
And
right.
we have a 2021, which is on ambulance 1.
That's right. It's 4
Which
years.
one are you proposing
Well, the
moving?
4-year-old one, you'd obviously move over to the new vehicle, assuming you get the new vehicle within 2 or 3 years.
So you wanna do this, you wanna do,
Oh, sure, just
Okay.
move it over.
But
I mean,
then,
that's a-
but
that's a-
then,
yeah.
but then one ambulance doesn't have, or has a 2016.
Sure, you just move the other Stryker, you've got another Stryker. It's on the other
But-
number 2 vehicle, just might move it over to this. The
but your
current-
point is it's already 10 years old.
But my
Yeah.
point is that the 2016,
Yeah.
by the time we will get this, will be 13 years old.
So,
So 2016, it's now,
Be 11 years old, right? Cause we'll get the thing in the bus in 2 years.
well, it's 9
3
years old,
years.
it's 9 years old now, right? So.
it's 9 years old now, and
And
we're
you
gonna
would have
get
it
it,
either,
we're gonna
it'd
get
be
it in
11
3
or
years.
12, whatever.
So I guess I'm just, my concern is that we're moving a 12-year-old piece of equipment that has a 13-year.
You know what it is? It's a hydraulic scissor lift.
I
No,
understand.
I mean,
yeah, correct. No, I
I mean,
understand.
there's nothing,
It's
this is,
very simple. No,
it's extremely simple.
correct.
This is nothing at all in the way, it's not like an engine where you can have
No.
hours and time. I mean, it really isn't. But anyway, I'm not gonna argue it, but you know my point on this one, that you really shouldn't be buying another Stryker at this stage. I mean, it doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Anyway,
I like
But I
Katie's thought, sorry.
I guess
Okay.
I'm just trying to understand what our policy is relative to end of life, or your point is that you don't believe the 13-year end of life.
oh no, not for a device like that.
Okay.
No.
I mean, I think that's fundamentally like where you're at. The reason you're willing to transfer it is that you don't believe that 13 years is truly end of life.
Oh, of course not. Of course not. Remember, it hasn't been used
Hasn't
for
been used.
6 of those years anyway, or 8 of those years. It doesn't even, just sits around, right?
Well, but that ambulance has been collecting mileage, so it's been used, right? I mean,
He said 6 weeks worth. That's
well,
what he
but well, actually, I mean, you know, if we're talking hydraulics, it's actually even worse for it, right? A hydraulic piston that's not being actuated, you're not getting the lubrication. So it's almost worse for it to sit for 7 years than be used for 7
Well, it
years.
depends whether the seals are any good,
Well,
basically.
but they'll dry out, right? If you're not actually using the piston, the seals.
That's one argument. Actually, I agree with that.
Yeah, yeah, that's what I'm saying,
I
right?
understand that
So, you know, so flip side is like,
I
if it's,
understand that totally.
okay, so if it's sitting
I
for
agree
7
with
years,
that.
maybe we do want to get it.
I do agree. I do agree.
Maybe we should go over and use it.
We should, either that, or put in new seals, which is.
The capital budget,
Up and down, you know.
you're saying we should get into the project, let's get some transports going, right? Sprain my ankle.
Anyway,
It's
it's
just
all
a ride
moot.
along.
Moot for
Oh,
the
I've
time
already
being.
done that.
Yeah.
I've been in the
I
ambulance.
mean,
I've done ride along,
think-
I've done ride alongs, but not the good kind.
I think the big thing that really surprised me was that he's lost the one person who was capable of maintaining the equipment. Number one, that's a real shocker. And number two, he's got 3 openings which he can't fill.
Yeah.
I'm saying, oh my God,
Yeah.
Yeah,
the real
that's-
problem is much more of those things as I see it. Those are really bad problems.
Okay.
We depend on life support systems, my God,
Yeah.
and the people,
We're missing 3 EMTs and a, you know,
and a mechanic.
more than a mechanic, yeah, exactly.
Or a
A technician, right,
mechanic,
as we call,
right.
yeah, exactly, yeah.
Well, the only 2 departments that have maintenance capability are the DPW and the facilities, because the schools doesn't, nor does,
Yeah. Yeah.
nor does fire, nor does, police.
Yeah.
We have a dearth of maintenance, we always have, but we also have a dearth of facilities to do the maintenance. There's only one person that has a lift, and it's Carl.
And that's 30 years old. Right, exactly. Yeah, replacing that, right, exactly.
So, yeah.
So whack one more at a time. All right, so let's move on to the additional bus lease. Is that, I think that's probably the one that's the easiest to kind of
Yes.
tee up. You want to do it?
So, we, went back to do, and asked the schools two things relative to the ninth additional bus. One was, to reconfirm pricing, which I'm glad we did, because surprise, surprise, it's changed a little bit since September. So the pricing in September was 20,000 something. The updated pricing now for a 5-year lease is 22,224. The other thing that we find out by going back to DeVivo, who we've, I think, done at least the last 2 cycles with in terms of bus leases, is that IC Bus, which is the US manufacturer that has supplied our current fleet of 8, has switched to a new model. So it's called the Next Gen 77 passenger, but it's still an IC bus. So it will be compatible in the sense that it's not a Bluebird, it's not a new manufacturer, but it is the next generation. And that's part of the reason for the change in pricing, is that they've gone.
Little school bus, like
Still a school bus.
Next Gen, like it's yellow, it's got a bunch of seats, it's got a door.
Provided a very nice picture of which is,
It's got sleeker headlights, but it's still a school bus.
no, I think I upload the wing panel. It's got this.
Oh, I saw the wing panel. Oh, yeah,
So,
because, yeah, that's exactly what I care about, yeah, right.
First thing I thought was that's the fire, that's the new ambulance.
Yeah, right.
They're talking about that angle thing too.
So-
Anyway, they all love it.
Yeah, I was like, what's a wing panel? And I was like, oh.
I don't care exactly. Look at all the switches.
I know.
Pick the kids
So,
up.
I know.
in my mind, there were sort of 2 cases that I think the schools made for the 9th bus, and the first was the fact that we have 0 spares
I
right now.
understand that.
And that is just not a situation that is tenable. And the second argument was that they, at least at the elementary school, have 3 routes, I believe, that are at max capacity, and they have other routes that are at 45 minutes, where ideally
It's too long.
it's too long.
Yeah.
So the 9th bus to me made a lot of sense. It would make us a 10 bus fleet. We would have the existing 8 plus the 9th
Plus-
diesel plus the electric,
the
which
electric. That's right.
we're stuck with until the end of the lease, or
So the real argument is gonna come to, what are we gonna do about that? Whether gonna replace that electric one with another gas one, or are we just gonna simply stay with the 9? That'll be the long-term question.
Correct,
Right.
yeah,
Right.
that's,
and I think that would, and I think
Yeah,
some of it
right.
depends on how many
Yeah.
routes there are.
Yeah.
There is a view, and I listened to the school committee's budget presentation, that they see a short-term increase in the number of students in the district, and then a longer-term decrease. So I think some of it will come down to when the electric bus lease is ending, what the enrollment projections are looking like, and are we gonna stay at 9 bus routes? Are we gonna go back to 8? Because
Understood.
then you would have
Sure,
still have a spare. I think always having a spare is sort of the critical.
I understand.
Yeah.
Sure.
The mechanics of this are a 5-year lease,
not
that-
to own, right?
not to own, and since our 8 bus lease expires in FY 27, there'll be 3 years remaining on the 9th bus
Mhm, mhm.
in the lease. So I guess we'll have a decision point at that point when we
What
re-up.
we do with the next group of buses.
Next, do we do a 3 or do we do a 4 and ask for an extension on the 9th? I assume that would be something that DeVivo would consider, but
It expires at the end of FY 27,
Yes.
just, yeah.
Yes.
yeah. So we'll be revisiting this in FY 28.
yes,
Yeah.
exactly. So I personally recommend the 9th bus. and the increase in the fleet, leasing costs.
Is the Bluebird worth anything? Is it on a sale?
So the Bluebird's out to surplus right now.
Yeah.
Currently the bid's at $1,000. So.
$5,000, let's go.
I don't know if it's really worth
Put a new head
anything.
gasket in that.
It has a blown head gasket.
I need
Yeah.
something to do.
The
Yeah.
$15,000
Your
repair,
head gasket?
yeah, $15,000
Oh,
repair,
fans.
Where's Marty when you need him?
New Hampshire.
Yeah, exactly. We would do that for $800. It would be back on the road.
It was a head gasket, not a valve covered gasket.
Head gasket, yeah.
A head gasket.
A head gasket is what.
Yeah, it's got I mean,
They
it's,
must have burned it out.
no,
About half.
yeah, at that amount, if you're at 500,000 miles though, I mean, that's.
Yeah, I guess. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, so,
I think this sort of brings up the only other conversation point, which is, we did find out, by going back to the schools that there are actually 3 vehicles that they were looking to surplus.
I saw that.
The minivan from
Surprise.
2001, I was like, where has that little,
Yes, where'd that come from?
well,
where's that parked?
well.
What's it look like?
exactly.
It's in the woods and on the parking.
Is it really?
Gasco's, yes, it's buried.
Yes, so it's been kicking around. I don't know the last time it was used because we outsourced sped transportation in
doesn't work.
2016.
But
So it
they
could have
don't wanna
been
get
just
it right.
rattling around and never got surplus. So
Got it,
bottom line, it's now.
Scrap value,
It's
yeah.
now getting scrapped.
got it.
The other thing that came up is that the strategic plan for transportation for sped has evolved again, back to where we were, back to the future, back to 2016, it's 100% outsourced.
Yeah.
So the wheelchair van, which I think had both sped purposes and purposes for injured in-district students,
We had one situation. right?
Um,
We had a disabled-
capital authorized at special town meeting 2019, the purchase of a $55,000 van that is now going to be surplused or traded in or
Traded in.
traded in.
Yeah.
So the good news is that Michelle has investigated that. It's a 2020, it has 50,000 miles on it.
Yeah.
It's in working condition, it's actually
That's good.
running.
Yep.
And it was $20,000 from DeVivo, and you thought you could get more.
I think we could get more if we went out to bid on the actual
Okay.
van. I think we could get a local dealership to actually
Okay.
pay us probably about $10,000 more for it. It's very similar to the outdoor fairs
Yes,
vans
We
that we
just went
just.
through this, yeah,
Yeah.
correct.
And,
They're in high demand, yeah.
they're in high demand.
Yeah.
This one's in, I would say, better condition.
Oh, wow.
And
Sure.
it has there's more bells and whistles to this, which would be beneficial for somebody else, so I would like to shop this around. The difference here is though, if you trade it in, it goes towards the purchase. If you surplus it outright or sell it outright, it's going to hit the general fund, so.
I don't really care about that operation, yeah, about the mechanics of that. I mean,
I think $10,000 more is a meaningful
Oh,
amount
yeah,
that
of
should
course.
Yeah, yeah,
of
go
course.
back to the general
course,
fund.
of
the taxpayers in
The
general.
taxpayers in
yeah,
general, is sort of
yeah,
where I'm at.
we should be paying fee for them,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
If it was,
I just
if
have
it
to
was,
state that
it was
because
a
a lot
couple
of people
grand, I'd
think, no,
say.
it's my
Oh,
van,
yeah,
why doesn't it
I
go to
agree.
my
I agree.
purchase?
Correct, no, the schools,
Right.
correct, that's not.
That's not how it
yeah,
works.
Yeah, we're gonna make a decision on the vans
Yes,
on their own merits, sorry, on the buses.
but if I think that's what we should do. I think I'll put that out to bid this week.
Okay.
And see how quickly we can get something.
Okay.
So for on the additional bus, I've got
Yes.
nothing to add. I think, the only small thing to add is. Gonna take that whole sentence back, I guess, is just, I'm encouraged, I wanna see if the 9th bus has flexibility, like before we had, it's called the Bluebird, it was an older bus. And they kind of used it for a fill-in, but they never took it out of town. So now if you have another new bus that you can transit, what kind of flexibility does it give the district that
Right.
before they didn't have? So in addition to all the clear things, I think there's also an X factor out there that's, we'll probably see additional benefits from it. So I'm also in great support of the 9th diesel bus.
And, in the past, and I'm sure that Ray, who's the transportation coordinator, will do this also. I mean, there will be the electric plus the 9 diesel. The general plan has always been to rotate the mileage, so it's not like the spare never leaves the district. The spare gets mixed in, so it runs core routes, the spare runs athletic routes, so that the goal is
Hydraulic
always.
seals keep working.
Right, exactly.
I got
So-
it, I got it.
The
Right,
panel keeps
right,
all the lights.
right,
still-
right, okay, good.
Right. And I think they will always use the electric when it's working, which is, call it
Right.
90% of the time,
Right.
as
Yeah.
A, it's cost efficient, and B, it is only town only, so they'll want the spare to be a diesel because that will allow them to
Sure.
do athletics starting at 2 o'clock.
Sure.
So I think what Corey also sort of underscored is that by having a spare, an operating spare that is a diesel bus, they will be able to take some of the athletic transportation load
Sure.
in a way that they haven't been able to accept by renting buses, which they did out of their operating budget to sort of reduce the outsourced vendor. So there is some additional capacity
I-
that's happening.
I think the big issue is coming when you cease to have the electric bus. Now the big issue really is much more likely, do we buy it? Or do we lease a 10th bus?
Yeah.
Because we've been using the electric one. So this argument is pretty well, you have a Bluebird, you use it as a spare, now we got a spare, which is even more useful. I mean, it sounds like it's obvious, right?
Yeah, but the electric is a bridge will burn another
Yeah.
day. Exactly.
So, I mean,
Yeah,
to
and
me,
and
this
you
is-
may not,
right.
and if they're back if they go from 9 down to 8 routes again,
Yeah.
you may not need to expand the route, because
Yeah,
you'll
right.
continue to have one.
Right. So let's see where the population goes.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
So, I mean, Kate and I have been like in this really hard. Obviously, you've heard from us, but we'd like, if you guys are in favor of a motion from the other three members, that way it, it comes from a clean source, because, we're obviously been,
Fingerprints are all.
we just want to be sure that we've made it clear and we've answered all the questions. So, Chris, if you're in favor, you can make a motion to approve.
What are you calling on me?
I don't know. Susan's the chair. The chair often doesn't make motions, so.
I vote in favor.
Okay, so we have a motion.
Well, I'll second the motion.
I'll second.
So Bruce made the motion?
And that's for a 5-year lease at 22 to 24.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yes.
All those in favor? Aye.
I,
5-0.
Excellent.
Okay, so the next thing is, we've been talking about for years athletic vans. As you heard in the last meeting, that became a multifunction school activity bus with its own classifications, own complications. The latest price quote for a 3-year lease is $22,034 per year. I have been
You've
in
been
the
the-
weeds on
you've been the
this.
Devil, I've been the angel. So we've had-
Correct, and we've gone through we've had lots of really intense conversations, gone through a lot of data. I think the facts, as I see them, are there are certainly a use case for one of these vehicles for teams that are small or teams that, if we have 2 buses going out of the district, every once in a while, a team that can't find transportation. But it also doesn't make sense to transport a team of 10 in a bus that can fit 77. So there's going through the whole list, and I went through it line by line, and I compared every date and, what's going on, what happens if there's competing interests. There's enough use cases where I think this will be, even with what we know, and one of these will be used all the time, but will often, and that's not including Safe Harbor or Rec or these other programs throughout the year that need to transport kids right now. And so I think just for sports, there's a use case for it. But I'm still concerned about getting into a long-term lease for 2 buses without really, I think there's still an unknown X factor here where it may take us a couple of years to figure out how to use them. We may figure out that, we actually, Ellen brought this up in the select board meeting. Maybe we actually want to get, because they're about the same amount of money, a 10th full-size diesel bus versus then a small one. So I think there's still a lot of unknowns, but I think it's worth the investment for us to take the leap for one of these things for 3 years. Just to see how it works, because I don't think, as I said in the meeting today, I think we can project, but at the end of the day, if we look at the odometer after 3 years and say this is something that's working, we can continue on. I think 1 year or 2 years is too short because it may take them a year to figure out how to use it, right? It really may be, and I don't want to set them up for failure. But I also don't want to get into a lease for 5 years for 2 and have only 1 be used, especially because, you know, these are expensive, right? Even though they're this big, they're expensive. And I also, the other thing that occurred to me is, if there's ever a situation where we're sending both vans to one place, we've lost the capital argument because you can just use one major bus for the same price. So I also don't want to create a situation where we're allowing ourselves to spend to poorly allocate capital.
Right.
So at the end of the day, my recommendation would be to authorize 1 school activity bus for a period of 3 years. And then allow the schools with their additional bus and this thing to figure out how it works, and then they come back
Whether
and
they
tell us.
really need another one or not.
Exactly,
Or if it's
yeah.
not working.
Or if
And
they
I
want
would-
another big bus,
Right.
right?
I would look at the outsourced transportation hours that they provided us as a clue to sort of what the demand is. In FY 27, they were able to reduce the number of outsourced athletic transportation hours to 70. And that's
Right.
because they rented 2 other buses.
Right.
This year, where they have 0 spares, so the Bluebird's broken and they're not renting anything because they're under budget constraints. They are already at 140 hours, and that was year to date back in December of outsourced transportation, which puts them, you know, in a position where you can see that they are under-resourced when it comes to athletic transportation. Now, the 9th diesel bus is going to solve a piece of that. It's going to solve a piece of it. So I think I'm with Corey in that I don't think the use case for 2 is supported. I mean, when we looked at what they had coded as blue, those were instances where teams had transportation, but it was a diesel bus. But they could have been serviced by a smaller vehicle. You're basically making the case in those to swap one asset that we already own for a new asset. So we took those out of the equation, saying the blue, it's not the most efficient, and yes, we have to pay for a driver. But we already have the asset, so let's not doubly
just
pay
have
for the asset, like that doesn't make sense. So we narrowed it down to just the instances where we either had to do outsourced or a
Not
team
good.
didn't get transportation, and when we did that against 1 van or 1 bus, we came to it being cheaper than outsourcing.
Yeah, I think our cost per trip in those situations was under 500, just over $400.
Yeah.
Versus outsourcing, which was $900 a trip. So that's kind of where and a bus driver for 3 or 4 hours is hundreds of dollars plus all that kind of stuff. So that's that was our number break even to say, okay, if you did 2 buses, the numbers don't work at all. But if you do one bus, I think we're under $400 a trip, and that's compared to the other things we have to use them for. Yeah, I think a fair deployment.
The other thing that we went back to the schools on and it's not our lane, but Corey and I spent some time, is we went out to other districts in the state that have these vehicles and looked at what their policies and procedures are. So we sent the schools 3 policies and procedures, 1 from Needham, 1 from Weston, and 1 from Chelmsford and.
Chelmsford.
Exactly. And sorry for my mispronunciation. And then Superintendent Shannon also came from Canton, where they had them, so we asked that they take a look at what their policies and procedures are going to be, and there's going to need to be a policy and procedure manual put in place, including pre and post trip checklists. This isn't like keys on a hook that somebody goes in, like somebody's gonna.
Right, it's kids on a bus, right?
Yeah,
There's a
yeah.
lot of stuff.
There's a lot of pieces, so we have challenged them to look at the operational piece.
But that was a good exercise because we learned that most districts have one. Even districts that are much larger than us have one, right? So I don't think we found a district that had, I mean, we didn't do an exhaustive search, but yeah, I mean, you know, most districts that or every district that I ran into that had one.
Yeah.
So there's something, I don't know if that's a data point, but I think that supports the idea of getting one. But considering, you know, districts that were twice our size didn't have 2, you know, maybe there's something there, so.
The last piece was just sort of what are we actually talking about? Is it the Chevy vehicle? Is it a Ford vehicle? It was actually a good exercise to go through, because there are basically 2 chassis that you can choose from. The Ford one is actually the smaller of them, and what the schools are recommending is a TL 400. And there's two different configurations. You can have a 16 passenger or 14 passenger. They're proposing the 14, which basically takes out one row of seats and leaves you space for equipment. The overall length on this vehicle is 240 inches. I actually went and I looked, I was just curious, like, I don't like to drive anything big, so I'm sort of adverse, but a Suburban XL, which many moms
Oh,
in
yeah, sure.
town
I
drive,
know.
is 226 inches long.
Oh, interesting.
So.
Good data point. Cool.
So.
So we can park this downtown is what you're saying.
So there's a mom out there.
One of the
classic.
diagonals.
Exactly, that's, we were doing it anyway, so.
Exactly. And then the width on this vehicle is 83 inches and a Suburban XL is 81 inches. So it's
That's
basically,
probably because of the mirrors too, those giant
Right.
mirrors.
Yeah.
It's probably
but
not-
anyway, so
Yeah.
in my mind, I needed a little reference point because the
Mhm.
pictures weren't working
Sure,
for me. It's
sure,
basically a slightly, the wheelbase, the wheelbase on it is longer than a Suburban, so it won't have probably as nice turning radius, but
Probably
a
will,
little
because yeah, the transits are really good.
Yeah.
Like they're designed, the transit was based off the Sprinter, which was designed to be like a European cargo van. So like to go around Europe, so they have great turning radiuses to begin with.
anyway, so so ultimately, it's the Ford product, the TL 400, and I just think of it as a slightly larger Suburban XL, which also gave me a little bit of comfort relative to convincing a athletic coach to drive this. You're not asking them to drive something that's
That has one of those giant panels.
right.
Yeah.
It has a
What is it called?
wing.
Yeah, whatever it's called.
Wing panel, exactly. So anyway, that was the thought process that went into this, and I'm sort of with Corey, like. There's no more data or analysis that we can ask the school for. I think
A lot of
the
time.
test.
Well, they've loaded you with data,
Yeah.
loaded you with data.
Well, yeah, also, but we
Well, I
also,
mean, the per
Yeah.
trip thing you guys
Yeah.
just.
yeah,
went
that's,
through, that's very telling, and that tells the story you're looking at.
And I think, with 3 years, it either works or it doesn't, and if it doesn't work. It's gone. If it's working, then.
You
I
just,
agree, yeah.
there are two things that really, you gotta be careful.
Mhm.
And this is what's happening. And I asked the question of superintendent,
Yep.
which is, what's the limiting principle here to this whole thing?
Mhm.
And the reason I ask that is not that I don't want kids to have sports, but I look at the kind of sports we're adding and how much it really adds to the kids. I don't know, athletic ability, and I know it's hard to say it, but quite frankly, if you're gonna play golf, your parents ought to be actually covering your costs on that. We should not be covering golf. And I know that sounds as though I'm denying some group of kids something they love to play. Well, great. But that is really a very rich man's sport, to be honest with you. Maybe very few towns actually allow it. Yet if you take golf out of the entire list, probably 50% of the ones that don't get covered are golf. Maybe you have a different number, but I looked at it and I said, no, it's a high percentage is golf, which is the demand created by having a golf team, right? The other one is probably more legitimate, which was the JV volleyball. I remember contributing to that at the dump several times. But I question really whether or not, shouldn't they be going at the same time the senior teams go? Wouldn't you necessarily have your meets coincide with the volleyball for any of this?
They used to do that. but
Yeah, why?
There has
why is
been a
this-
change.
Why is this change? So I don't want to debate it. I just say these things raise questions in my mind about these things.
well, it's also like where we have to go, right? There's some
Yeah.
change where now we're traveling much farther.
I know.
And so that's, I mean,
I know.
that made everything way more complicated. We also can't transport in parents' cars, like there's a bunch of rules. And it's even with this van where we can't use a normal van, we have to buy this thing, there's these mind-blowing regulations which
Sure,
just
sure.
defy common sense.
Sure,
I
I
would be
understand.
1,000,000%.
I know,
Yeah.
I know. Anyway, those are my reservations about it. And I said,
Yeah.
I understand the arguments and I understand why you could make a perfectly good argument for buying a van. I do. But I really question whether or not these things there's no limiting principle here at all, at all. And I don't want to be facetious, but say, well, maybe you want to play squash, or maybe you want to play paddle tennis, or maybe, I don't know, where's the end of it all? And yet. Do kids have to get it through the schools always? Anyway, sorry, that's sort of a.
I think the one thing I did take away is that, and this is what Superintendent Shannon did
Yeah,
say
yeah.
to you, is that there hasn't been anything added recently.
I
I think
heard that.
I think the most recent one was volleyball, and that's
Well,
now
that's the
going.
JV part, right?
No, we didn't have a volleyball team.
At all?
We didn't have a volleyball team at all.
Oh, that I didn't pick up.
We did not have a volleyball team at all, and they went through, I think, when I was leaving school committee in 2018, 2019, they were petitioning to be a club, and then frankly, they built up the demand for varsity, and now they have two. Part of the reason they head in different directions is they've actually got 2 JV teams now. There's so much
Yeah.
demand in terms of students that want to play it. I mean,
Nice.
so I hear you in terms of like, what is the end? I would say that most towns that I know of have a golf team, and that's not an aberration in terms of, I think the one aberration that we do have is sailing. Just because of who we are.
How that works, yeah.
But
But they don't require transportation. So, Yeah.
But, and dealing with, the only thing I will say is that it is part of the psyche of Cohasset Public Schools is
The emphasis.
the emphasis
I know
on,
that.
it's the little town that could, and we are successful, so that is part of
do we
the.
have a chess team? I don't think we have a robotics
No,
team.
that's the
Like,
We do
problem.
have-
that's what I'm saying.
We do
That's my
robots.
We have a robotic, but yeah, like there's no quiz bowl. Do we have a quiz bowl? You know, so that's,
I
I mean,
don't-
yeah, these are
We
the.
do have Model UN.
Listen, if we're
Okay.
gonna get squashed, we have a lot bigger problem than a van.
We did
It's true.
court.
We did courts. Yeah.
But yes, the limiting factor is the fact that you have to go through an application process, which takes 5 to 7 years to become a sport. But yes,
Well, and the fact that we've got declining enrollment, we may see a triage here anyway of just teams that can't exist
Yeah.
anymore.
I
That's
think
not fierce.
you've nailed it. The bigger conversation is the enrollment trends. When I was on school committee, we maxed out at 1650. We are now at 1347.
Yeah.
So we've dropped 200 kids
Yeah.
in terms of
I
enrollment.
think the incoming classes are slightly larger now, though,
Yes,
right?
that's the trick.
That's what's going on.
And that's
Right,
why we're
right,
having
right.
the ninth bus conversation is,
Yeah.
is the elementary
It's
school.
correct, except
is-
that the kindergarten this year is like 3/4 male.
Yeah.
It's weird. Yeah.
Well, the argument for the volleyball is it's a woman's sport, it's a girl's sport.
You
And so
know
that
this?
is, that's a significant argument.
It's
Right.
class of
They're
58,
So-
there's only 19 girls in the whole class.
So you too in Hull as well? Yeah, I think Annie's one of like 3 girls in the entire class.
What
It's
is
just,
happening? What happened?
Oh.
50-50.
Phosphates in the water will work PFAS.
Yeah, we have like 75 total enrollment. Yeah, exactly.
Anyway, so that's the pitch. And again, Corey and I have been in this
I
like
know, yeah.
knee deep on
You've done a
this, so
huge-
like we
Here's
will,
one, I know.
And I was, as Katie said, I was very,
practical.
I was, let's considerate about getting to the point where I thought this was a good use of capital funds.
Okay, so that's enough for me, so.
Then I would love a motion from somebody.
I move.
Well, move a certain amount of money, how much are we moving?
Yeah,
Moving
The
22.
motion would be to recommend a 3-year lease for a multifunction school activity bus at a cost of $22,034 per year.
22,000
So-
what?
So moved.
22,034.
$22,034. What did I say?
You did. I
You
just
did.
didn't know
Okay.
it.
I'll second.
Second,
I second.
okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Yeah, we have more data on the school bus, and I think we have, I think we could have rebuilt town hall 4 times.
This is the first year I've seen so much data on so many topics from the schools.
Yeah.
Probably the most comprehensive data set I've ever seen.
Yeah. And a lot of that
Well,
goes
a
to
lot of it,
our
I was
colleagues,
gonna
yeah.
say, you know,
Well-
to get to the real details that we need. from
And it
information.
hasn't been without some crazy Ivans, which I think we've been pretty transparent with you on, but I think to your point, Ralph, sometimes it's the pushing to get to the, like, oh, we just saw the crazy Ivan, we're now talking a Ford, not a Chevy, like,
Yeah.
those are, important conversations, or
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
let's go
right.
back and double check the 9th bus. You know,
Right.
lease number to make sure it's still good, like, it's important to,
And a big thing was Katie found a lot of the stuff when she was on the school committee and would send it to the superintendent who was new to say, like, this is what we were doing, 5 years ago, this is what we're looking for. And that was, I think, the quality that we got for information after, Katie was able to find and share those earlier examples, was night and day. So that,
Right.
all credit to people that can archive and find old stuff, so to our colleague here, so.
Right. Another good reason that we're doing such a great job in improving the way we archive our information. Not that we can
There
get
you go.
anybody else doing it.
Right.
you don't mind my obsessing, I'm fine.
No, that's great.
I think that's it.
I have one thing before we adjourn.
You said no surprises.
No,
Oh, we gotta do
it's-
minutes. Yeah, okay.
No, it's nice. So next week, CPC is meeting Monday evening.
Yeah.
So we are gonna be presenting town hall to CPC on Monday.
Mhm.
I'd like to ask that we meet later in the week, just so we can get the ambulance voted, and then maybe we can talk some more about town hall. And then we have a couple of weeks to digest town hall and what's gone on through CPC, instead of, skipping a couple of weeks and rushing it at the end.
We should also have somebody from one or two of us go to that meeting as well.
I can post for you for Monday.
I
and you
don't
can.
think we should all be
Sure,
there.
sure.
I-
You want
As
to,
many as want to, right, sure, yeah, right.
If we post, then we can go.
We can go.
Like, we
Yeah,
can
that's
go,
fine.
like,
Go
it's
or
no
not go.
problem to
Right, sure,
post,
sure.
it just lets everybody go. I think I
Sure.
will probably zoom in if I can, but like.
I definitely want to.
well, I mean, because CPC is gonna be looking for, okay, what's capital's filling, and we should deliver the message of, hey, we have debt capacity, but not infinite debt capacity. We've calculated a very clear number goal. And to reflect, why we have that, because we have competing, needs that the town has, we've projected them out, and this is what we can do, and, that gives them a threshold to figure out what they can do.
And we were more, I'm personally more comfortable at 3.5 million than 5, like, in terms of the debt service.
Oh, yeah, at 5, we have to.
At
yeah,
5,
Yeah, no, yeah,
like, we don't do much besides.
rebuild
like,
town hall, in 5, we.
No, we do the bare minimum for all the departments, like one F-50 and a. like-
Yeah, at 5, there have to be more creative
Yeah,
ways.
so
of
not to
funding.
get into the big discussion right now, but we did submit the application today asking CPC for $1.5 million.
Okay.
Okay,
That's
then that
great.
gets us exactly where we want to be.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yep. So
Okay.
I will post for everyone Monday, and then should we post later in the week so we can talk about the outcome, or would you rather wait till the following Monday?
I just have one issue later in the week. I think, did you guys not get my email?
I did, I got your
Yeah,
emails.
so my mom passed away,
Oh, I'm sorry.
so I have her wake and funeral. At the end of next week.
Okay, so we'll wait till Monday.
We'll do the 31st.
Yeah.
I could use a week off. And you. could
All right,
use
so
a
we'll
week
do
off.
the
Yeah.
Monday,
So,
Yeah.
Okay, I will not be here for Monday, that Monday.
the 31st.
31st.
Okay.
I mean, I'm free other days
Well,
that
we're
week.
beyond that week, but the 28th is Friday for me, but I think I'm probably going down to Rhode Island on the 27th.
Yeah.
So we'll just keep to Monday next week with the joint meeting, and then we'll skip over to the next week.
I will be away
That's the
for
week. Ethan.
the 31st, which I think is a Monday.
Yeah,
And I'll be away on 7th, which I think is the next Monday.
Any appetite for zooming in from Tahiti or wherever you're gonna be?
One is the death of my
Where are you golfing?
wife's brother in
Oh,
California.
Sorry for making light of it, my
Yeah.
apologies.
Yeah, not a bit. The other is I am gonna take a vacation,
Okay,
yeah.
so are you
So
available? on April?
sometime this coming week, if you want me in the meeting, okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, otherwise I will not be available.
well, we can ping Francine, I mean, I think it's important, we have 5 members either way,
Right.
Correct.
and
So if Francine is available on the 31st, we're gonna stick
can-
with Monday, and then if
Yes.
not, I know select board's gonna meet on Tuesday, advisory will meet on Wednesday, which will leave Thursday, April 3rd.
I would like to have us. Maybe we meet on the 31st, even for 4, and we can revote it to 5 later on if we want, but I think we need to get a message to select board advisory of our recommendation. At least in a draft format. And if we want to redo it to 5-0 later on via like a quick Zoom meeting, that'd be fine, but I think we do need to have something to give to them. Does that make sense, Susan?
I think
Okay.
that's it.
So
Okay.
let's pencil in 31st, let's get everyone we can.
Okay.
I have a thought for all of you.
Mhm.
If you vote the fire ambulance for 500,000, or maybe it's 420, call it 420,000 for the sake of the argument.
Yep.
The fire department collects 450,000 approximately in transports every year. Why isn't that money returned back either to some kind of fund which supports future purchases, which is done in many other communities, and or goes back into the capital stabilization fund, which is where it came from in the first place? Which is kind of interesting, because in fact, it is the money specifically derived from having an ambulance.
Well, it's also staff though, or because we have people on that. I mean, I've had this thought on other things where your usage fee, like the fact that I say we lose money in the general fund, it disappears, it goes poof. It doesn't, but that's what it feels like, right? It exists in multiple other places in town. And for this case, if it's getting absorbed to pay staffing and maintenance, it's getting absorbed into the general fire fund, then I'm okay with it because it's at least, it's deferring a cost we would have eaten anyway.
Sort of the same argument that why the all facilities fees don't go to paying for the dump, it goes to local receipts, so we've got.
Well, that may change, so.
Well, I know, well, like, no, it's the enterprise fund conversation and.
But then it captures it, right? We're not gonna do an enterprise fund.
What makes it, whether it is repaving of Sandy Beach parking lot, if those fees will go where they should go.
Or do they get
Or-
absorbed somewhere?
Or, yeah, in other words, it makes it easier to actually pay for things if in fact it's getting paid for by some kind of a fee. And not to think about that is really a miss on our part. I know other towns do actually segregate that kind of money
Well,
out.
here's another one
Yeah.
for you. You brought up the fact that we're missing 3 firefighters. If we budgeted for them, there's salary we haven't paid. I guess that ends up in free cash, right?
It does
That's-
end up in free cash.
Yeah, so that's, I mean, an AMT is. I
Keep
mean,
in mind the amount of overtime costs that you're spending out now that you don't have.
Oh, so that
those three
gets
firefighters.
vacuumed up
Yeah,
anyway. Okay,
yeah,
gotcha.
so.
Do you think it's about net zero or is it more overtime?
More overtime.
Oh, so we're better off. So if we actually hire 3 people, okay,
We're in a better position.
interesting. All right, well, so much for that theory.
So anyway, just a thought.
Okay.
Would have paid for the ambulance.
Mhm.
That's right.
So are we meeting next Monday?
I'm posting a meeting for next Monday. You're welcome to attend.
CPC.
It's going to be a joint meeting with CPC.
It's
It's
not an hour
definitely-
meeting.
Yeah.
We're just posting it because
Okay,
the 3 of us can't be in a room together, legally speaking. So if more than
Okay.
2 of us want to go to that meeting, we just post it, but you don't have to go. There's nothing that we will be discussing as, we won't be taking any votes.
all right.
Yeah, so you
and-
can,
Community preservation,
I may skip it if
Commission
you guys are going.
Committee, CPC. Is so what percent of our,
So it's a separate bucket of money
Yeah.
that includes money from the state,
the percentage of state revenue tax?
correct,
It's a
yes.
tax on us, plus a small amount coming from the state.
But it has restrictions. We can't use it to buy a fire truck, for instance.
Right.
So it's only allowed to be used for recreation purposes, like if you're building a playground, conservation programs, like you're buying a park,
Right.
or affordable housing.
Housing price.
So,
Historical.
and historic
Historical.
preservation, 4 buckets, right? Yeah, so it's literally designed so it can't be eaten up by line of sight
I
towers.
think we get like $1 million a year or so, that goes into the CPC fund and then CPC votes, but it goes into a single fund and is then partitioned into those 4 categories.
Okay.
And then every year they get applications for spending on that. Now, historical, they haven't been spending out of that bucket for a while because they've been sort of basically saving towards town hall, so they have a balance that they could choose to fund that $1.5 million of historical renovations
Right.
to town hall, offsetting what the town and capital budget would have to cover in terms of the balance on the $5.5 million.
Maybe a-
We replaced all the windows at all the churches already, so.
Yeah.
An ironic thing about this $1.5 million that's going to be proposed. Jackie asked Tom Reardon for time to talk about the historic district, which the town wants to do in the downtown area. It was, I think, $14,000. He said, no, it's getting crowded out by the town hall. $14,000. That gives you an idea.
Doesn't
of
sound
what
like Tom.
It is tough,
Ah,
directly.
okay.
And I'm saying to myself, people's priorities, so.
I have one set of minutes
Okay.
for us to vote.
Yep.
From March 10th. Sorry, I've reviewed them. They look amazing.
Second.
I checked all the numbers, I checked all the votes.
Read them earlier, but-
I think we're the second already. Yeah, unanimous, right?
All those, yeah,
Yeah.
aye.
Yeah, right.
Who moves and who second?
Uh,
I think.
Susan
Susan moved.
You were second, no,
Yeah, sure, Katie second, great.
Perfect.
Motion to adjourn,
Yes.
second,
Second,
Katie Dugan, all those in favor?
Aye.
We are done.